Good morning from Vietnam, Mick. Thanks a lot for spending your afternoon and joining our show. So, on behalf of the listeners around the world, I want to say thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show, and congratulations on your success of the show. And hello to all your listeners. I look forward to a great conversation today.
Me too, me too. And Mick, you've been to our country before, so you know it's going to be very honors for our audience. We can have you to do a little introductions about who you are and the work that you do. Would you please do that for us?
Sure. My name's Mick Spiers. I'm the CEO and founder of the Leadership Project. And my vision is to inspire all leaders to challenge the status quo of what it means to be a leader. And my mission is to empower leaders with the knowledge and skills that they need to create amazing teams and amazing workspaces. And the purpose of that is so that people can fall back in love with their jobs again. I'm sure this is going to come up in the conversation today, but what I see in the world is a leadership crisis, and it's time to stop and reflect and rethink what it means to be a leader in a modern world.
Beautiful, beautiful. Mick, the pandemic shows that leadership. We are at the stage of leadership crisis all over the world, and then definitely there's a lot of things that we need to change from the old management practice, old leadership principles and stuff. So, thanks for doing that. So let's start with the basic definition. When you say that, like your vision is to help leaders to challenge the status quo, right? And what it means to be a good leader. So, in your definitions, what is it?
Mhm.
Is a good leader?
Yeah, right. So my definition of leadership is someone that can inspire people into meaningful action around a worthy cause. So a definition of a leader is someone that inspires people to do things because they want to do it, not because they were told to do it.
Mm.
Inspiring them to do it because they believe in the cause that they're working towards. So a great leader is able to articulate a really clear vision, a clear purpose, and to give people that vision and purpose in a way that they want to go on the journey with them. A great leader also very openly and transparently shares their values and beliefs. And by doing so, by doing this ability to articulate a clear purpose and to be able to articulate your values and beliefs, you start surrounding yourself with people that believe in the things that you believe. And when people believe in the cause, they go above and beyond and will do things beyond their own dreams. So a great leader is able to draw out of people their own personal greatness, heading towards this purpose and vision that's been set. A great leader is someone that treats people with respect. Everyone in the workplace wants to feel seen, heard, and to feel like they matter. So that leader is able to articulate that vision and purpose, articulate their values and beliefs, and then draw people in that believe in the things that they believe, and then treat them with respect to ensure that they feel seen, heard, and that they matter. And that's when great things can happen, because we're all only blessed with 24 hours in a day. So if we try to change the world by ourselves, we will never make any impact. But if we're able to inspire people around us into meaningful action around our worthy cause, before you know it, there's 10 of me, or there's 20 of me, or there's 100 of me that believe in the things that I believe and work towards that worthy cause.
Wow, thanks for sharing that, Mick. So it's inspiring people and move them into actions, and so that through create the environment and then have respect for them, clear and have clarity in vision, share the visions, right? Build trust and draw people together in the common goals, right? So why, if leaders are doing that, right, why we having the leadership crisis these days?
Yeah, so people don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, and they don't feel that they matter. So when you look at research from organisations like ATD, the Association for Talent Development, or Gallup,
Yeah.
we find that only 1 in 5 people in the world truly love their job and like their boss. And what they're feeling is a lack of purpose, a lack of meaning, a lack of impact in what they do. So what we've had is decades of what I'm going to call alpha-style managerial practices. where people essentially take the role of the boss, where they tell people what they do. They don't take the time to inspire them. They don't take the time to treat them like they matter. They just treat them like a employee, or they treat them in that way where they're just telling them what to do instead of inspiring them into action. So the leadership crisis has been building up over time. Now, to give people a little slack here, I can understand how it's happened. Like if I think about the first-time leader, people that get put into their very first leadership role, generally they go through a roller coaster of emotions. They get the euphoric highs that they've finally been recognised for being good at what they do, through to the thud of anxiety when they realise that no one's actually shown them what it means to be a leader. So their only vehicle that they can use is to start looking around them and start mimicking the behaviour of the managers and bosses they've had before them, because that's their role model of what a boss looks like. But if we're sitting in a situation where only 1 in 5 people like their boss, we're mimicking the behaviour of bosses that didn't have good leadership practices. So it becomes a cycle, and we haven't broken that cycle. We're just mimicking behaviour of the ones before us, and the cycle continues. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense to us. So, there was a lot of investment from corporations, onto helping managers to become better manager and better leaders also. So why didn't it work, for many company over the many years like this, Mick?
So good question. I'm going to say ineffective transformation and change practices. Ineffective transformation and change practices. And I went through a lot of this myself, by the way. The typical approach of teaching someone leadership skills is to send someone off on a 5-day leadership retreat. They might go away somewhere, they'll drink from a fire hose for 5 days of someone teaching them leadership principles. And then they have a good time, it's great. They bond with other people in their company, they might enjoy some wine or beer, and they'll have this bonding experience. But then they go back to work the next Monday and exactly nothing happens. Nothing changes. Now, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. First of all, they've been bombarded with multiple concepts all at once. And they go back to work on Monday and they don't even know which one to start with. The second reason is what we call the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve has actually been well known in psychology circles for a long time. But at day 7, after learning some new technique or concept, etc., if it hasn't been reinforced in some way, people only remember 10%. 10% of what they were taught. So you've spent all of this money sending people off on a potentially great leadership program, but then you don't embed it. You don't have that cycle of what we call learn, do, reflect. The best way to change your habits is one habit at a time, and leadership is a habit. Change one habit at a time, learn how to do it, go and do it, and then reflect on the experience. So I'm going to say the reason why we haven't seen a shift, despite companies investing in leadership development, is ineffective
transformation,
education and learning techniques.
Beautiful. I totally agree with you with that. We've been sent to a lot of training facilities, retreat events, and then go back the next Monday, like you say, and then too many things to share, too many things to inspire, with too many things to do, right? And none happen.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then the lack of that embedding. I'm going to talk about that with the forgetting curve. So if I was drawing on a whiteboard right now, this would probably make more sense. But with the forgetting curve, there's something that really interesting happens. So if I taught you something new today, you would 7 days from now, you would only remember 10% of what I teach you.
Yep.
But if I contact you in 2 days' time and I discuss it with you, not teach it to you again, but have a discussion with you. Now, what did you take from our discussion the other day? And I engage you and I talk with you. Your learning goes back up to 100%, and then it starts dipping off again. And then if I contact you again 2 days later and say, okay, how's it going now? How is the practice? How are you implementing it? So if I'm coming back with different checkpoints on what we call embedding for you, the 10% retention becomes 90% retention. If I come back and check in with you a few times in the subsequent days after the learning. So it's not just about, don't bombard people with too much at once, but also it's about repetition and embedding to make sure that they truly got the new concept, that they went and applied it, and that they reflected on what that new practice meant for them. And that's when you can get a massive shift in the implementation of this new concept, instead of just going, I learned something interesting and now I've forgotten all but 10% of it.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So Mick, let's travel time. All right. Let's figure out why you are doing this. So let's. When I was young, when I was a kid, I wanted to become an astronaut. And wearing the suit and jumping in different planets. Right? Life did not give me any chance to do that. So when you were a little boy, Mick, what was your dream about the future self, though?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you might be surprised at the answer. I wanted to be a professional sports person, and I kind of almost got there. I was a semi-professional rugby player when I was young. I played cricket at high levels as well, not quite as high as the rugby, but yeah, I wanted to be a professional sports person when I was young, and then when I was graduating from school, I went into the army. And I studied aircraft maintenance engineering. So I worked on helicopters and I worked in defence aerospace for 15 years. That was the first 15 years. And I was playing rugby part-time. And I was enjoying both of those, in fact. I quite enjoyed it. But I guess what happens next is more pivotal in that. So after 15 years in defence aerospace, I pivoted in what's called urban mobility. So I spent the next 15 years of my career in the space of technology companies that develop urban mobility technology, that all of the stuff that makes a city work. Okay, and this is going to have an important lesson at the end of this. So I had a vision of a world where people could move freely around their cities without delays, without congestion, and ultimately without stress. And I spent 15 years of my life trying to de-stress the way someone gets to and from work, the commute, because for many people that is very stressful. And then through my career, there was this dawning realization that crept up on me that for many people, the stressful part wasn't the commute. The stressful part was the time in the four walls of the company.
Wow.
So you could say that my purpose, ignore maybe the first 15 years of my career, but my purpose is to de-stress people's lives and to improve their quality of life. And in my urban mobility days, that was all about the commute. In my leadership practice, it's all about the time at work, trying to make the workplace less stressful, more meaningful, and to get people to fall back in love with their jobs again.
Beautiful, Mick. So see, the time to commute is too minimal compared to the time that we spend at work, right? So you tell us, please, in the 15 years working at urban mobility and then trying to decluster the road and stuff like that, so the people can commute faster, better, more efficient and stuff like that, right? And that was a very, very nice and big, ambitious goal that you mission that you have for yourself. Since when during that 15 years you realized that it wasn't about the road and the traffic, but it was about the quality of works that stresses people around? What happened during that then? When?
Yeah, so it was over the last 5 years when I started doing a lot of research into psychology, doing a lot of research into what are the stresses in people's lives. And you were right. Like in some bad cities, you see some very congested cities, you see people commuting for 2 to 4 hours a day. But what's common in nearly every city is people spend up to 1/3 of their lives in the workspace. So the commute might have been 2 to 4 hours in the worst of congestions, but the workplace is 8 to 12 hours, or unfortunately for some people, 16 hours a day. So they're spending 1/3 of their life in this workspace that either doesn't inspire them or worse still, completely stresses them out. And that was when I went, I've spent my life working on this problem, but this problem's actually bigger. By the way, I still have the passion around urban mobility. I still want to keep on improving the way people commute because that's stressful too. But I see the leadership problem as being a bigger problem.
Wow. And then when you realize that, you open your company, the leadership project, to have leaders to get improved, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so all kinds of things. I started my podcast, the Leadership Project podcast. I went and did my coaching certification. I've done 2 levels of coaching certification with ICF, and I wrote my first book. I guess we'll talk about that soon.
Yeah.
And I opened the doors of the Leadership Academy. And the Leadership Academy, funnily enough, it takes all of these principles of leadership and teaches them in a different way. So think about what we spoke about before. What I do now is I embrace the concept of micro-learning. I teach one habit at a time and then get people to go and practice that habit and embed that habit. I also practice collaborative or social learning, where they're learning from each other, because the more people talk about leadership, the more they remember, the more it embeds, etc., etc. And we also have a bit of fun with it as well. So we build in a bit of gamification. So I believe that I'm flipping the traditional approaches to leadership development on its head and making it more about sustainable habit building.
Wow. Mick, I have a lot of executive friends all around the world, and by the time that they retire, they normally come to me and then they share their stories, right? And then we saw 2 things in common in their regrets. One is they could have always started their own company when they were younger, so that they can debut millions and billions for corporations. Why not doing it for themselves, right? They did not. And second is that they always wanted to write a book and sharing their stories, practice, and experience, so that they can carry when they as a legacy. And they yet doing that also. And so my wife and I always tell them that, hey, there's always time, you can always do that, and we try to push them to do that also. So you did both. You've been doing both very beautifully. So tell us first, on the entrepreneur side, why did you leave the corporate life with a lot of like comfortability, a lot of things already there ready for you, and go into the widening world and start the business from scratch?
It all comes down to purpose. I felt like it was a calling that I couldn't ignore anymore. So I was very successful in my corporate career. When I left, I was leading global businesses. I reached pretty close to the pinnacle of the urban mobility life. There was probably one more step, and that was it. I was probably as high as I could get in multinational companies that work on urban mobility technology. But this purpose, this calling to go and help leaders to create a better style, a better approach, and to improve their leadership skills, to be able to have the knowledge and skills they need to create amazing teams and amazing workspaces. I just couldn't ignore it anymore. So, yeah, it came and as you know, I said before that I still want to work on urban mobility because I think that's still a problem in the world. But when you wake up every day and all you can think about is leadership and how to help people to become better leaders, eventually you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that knocking on the door that someone is telling you, hey, you better go and focus on this. And then with the success of the book, and like now when I ran into someone 2 weeks ago at a company that I was visiting, and the person came up to me and they're like, oh, you're Mick Spiers. I've read your book. And then they start repeating back to me parts of the book, and it's like the joy and fulfillment that you get put money aside, the joy and fulfillment, it just fills your heart with so much joy that you had impact on someone's way of thinking, that you've shifted the way that they approach leadership. I can't ignore that.
Wow.
So that's why I end up doing this. Yeah.
Wow. Mick, I know that you had the purpose. You found your purpose, and your purpose was a noble one. So that you want to make positive change in this world, right?
Mm.
But a lot of people have found their purpose, but they didn't have the gut to do in that, and then they keep staying with what it is and ask what if questions, right? So
Mm.
when we want to help the people to have the courageous to go on and do things that following the inner selves, calling the purpose, calling them,
Mm.
right, instead of keep having it itching there every day, here and there. So when you had that calling, Mick, what did you do
Yeah.
to make sure that you move from that calling into actions?
Yeah. So clearly a lot of business planning, right? For me, it involved leaving where I was working and going and starting my own business. And I needed to make sure that the business was going to work and that I was going to earn enough money to put food on the table and roof over the head of my family. Because the joy and fulfillment of living your purpose fills your heart, but you do need to earn enough money to be able to pay your bills and all that kind of stuff. So that's how it looked for me. But probably going to surprise you to tell people to take a few beats before you do that. So I've got some advice to share with your audience here.
Please.
In finding your purpose, it's all about finding the way that you help other human beings. That's what purpose comes to, where you can have an impact, where you can have meaning on other human beings. So you can use techniques like Ikigai. And Ikigai is to really study deeply what you love doing, what are you good at, what can you be rewarded for, and how do you meet some kind of need in the world. And when I say need in the world, it's helping other human beings. And there's all kinds of ways. I strongly encourage people to look at the work of Zach Mercurio in this regard to help you find your purpose. However, here's the next step. Once you know what your purpose is with clarity, there's always multiple ways of how you can live that purpose. So start looking where you are first. So if you're sitting in let's say like I was, in a multinational company, and you wake up one day, or it might creep up on you over time, and you find yourself living an incongruent life where you're not enjoying your work anymore. It doesn't feel like it's the purpose that you're put on this planet. My encouragement here is, once you find that purpose, is don't just jump ship. Have a look where you are first. Go and talk to your boss and say, boss, look, I've had this realization that what I'm doing right now isn't fulfilling me fully. Like, I enjoy it, but there's something missing. And what I'd really like to do is X, Y, Z. And look for opportunities to do X, Y, Z in the company that you already work for. And you'll be surprised. So for me, I did decide to leave corporate world and go and pursue my own leadership academy. But in all honesty, I could have gone back to the company I was working at the time, Cubic, and said, hey, is there any way I can do this while still working here? And that would have been an alternate path. Now, I'm not unhappy with the path I took, but I just encourage people, once you find that purpose, don't just instantly go, oh, and here it is, I'm going there. Find your purpose and then look around you, 360 degrees around you, and go, how can I live that purpose in different ways? And for some, it'll be the entrepreneurial path. But for others, it'll be to live that purpose working for someone else. So don't instantly jump into entrepreneurship. Take a good hard look first.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. Make it very practical for a lot of people to relook at what they are thinking, because not everybody is born as entrepreneur, right? So you have a vision, and then you get you believe the vision is gonna lead you to somewhere that making an impactful for people, and financially it's stable for you. But when you get into the one in the world, then you cannot compete. You're gonna feel really, really differently about yourself, and with that, it's gonna impact on how you deliver, how you're gonna sustainably, live up with your purpose and vision. So thanks a lot for that
You got
practical
it.
one. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Well done.
Yeah. So now go to the next one, which is the book. All right, Mick.
Good.
I can totally understand, the proud feeling that you had when somebody came to you and then, hey, you Mick, you're the author that writing the book, and I wrote the book that you write. Definitely. So tell us, since when you have an idea? You had the idea of writing your book, though.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Right, so I, like many others, I'd been thinking about it for some time, but it took me a while to land on what was my first book going to be about. And I say first book on purpose because I'm already writing book 2 and book 3, and I've got many books coming. So that this will not be a one-time job. So I decided to look at which group of leaders out there probably are not well served with good leadership books. And what I decided on was the first time leader. Now, as it turns out, leaders from all kinds of stages in their leadership career are reading the book and enjoying it and getting value of it. But I wrote that book for the first time leader, that roller coaster ride that I spoke about before. And then what I did is I really did a lot of deep work on what we call an avatar. Who is my target audience that I'm trying to write this book for? And what is it? Where are they today? Where do they need to be? And what are all the things that they need to know to be able to accelerate their transformation towards being a better leader? Now, you can imagine, for me, this was, my first leadership role was 25 years ago. It was a very long time ago. So I had to wind myself back and think about all the things that I know today that I wish I knew when I took on that first leadership role, because I made my own mistakes as well. I was not a perfect leader from the outset, far from it. Maybe I was even at sometimes a bad boss, right? So I wound myself back to that first time leader and went, what are all of the things that I wish someone told me when I took that first role? And that's what's in the book. That's what's in the book. I did a mind map and went, okay, they need to know about this, they need to know about this, they need to know about this. And then the rest is history. The book, I'm not going to say it wrote itself because it's a lot of hard work, but the words started flowing out of me once I had a really strong concept of who I was talking about, who I was talking to, what they need to know, and then the words started to flow out of me.
Wow. So how did you remember all the thing that 30 years ago that you wanted, the lesson that you wished that you had back then, so that can make you a better boss, better leader? How could you recall all of that memories so that you can, build a book from there to help the people, they can learn and become, get into here?
Yeah, great question. And I guess in many respects, when you make mistakes, you remember those mistakes. You regret them and you remember them, right? And when you have these dawning realizations, so I think about some of the psychologists and other writers that have had a huge impact on my life in recent times. When you have those aha moments where someone explains something to you in a way that shifts your thinking, you never forget that, right? So first one would be remembering the mistakes you made along the way. By the way, remembering mistakes of other leaders, because I've had my fair share of horrible bosses as well, and I remember how they made me feel. And so those lessons are ingrained in my mind. And then those shifting moments, right? So I'm talking about the works of William Glasser, of Otto Scharmer, of Martin Seligman. These are people that of Jeff Bloomfield, that when I read their work, my eyes just were so opened by what they were telling me that I'll never forget their works. And it was those moments where I'm going, like I would read Glasser's work and I go, where was Glasser? By the way, he existed back then, but why didn't I know about Glasser's choice theory when I was 25? things like that. So, yeah. So I'm going to say, surprisingly, like talking about winding the clock back and remembering things from my career 25 years ago, it was actually surprisingly easy to remember because they were so impactful, these lessons in my life.
Wow. But it means that around, you know, throughout your life, you have a lot of moment of reflections and absorb new information in so that you can compare what you was and then, what can be better and stuff like that. Where can you find time for such moment, Mick?
Good question. And it doesn't take that long, but it does requires a disciplined habit to do this. I practice, and I've done this for a long time now, I practice daily self-reflection. I ask myself the same 5 questions every day, even today. So what's the first one? What went well today? What didn't go well today? What would I do differently if I had my time over again? What did I learn about myself today? And what did I learn about others? Every day for more than a decade and a half, I've asked myself those 5 questions. And if you take the time at the end of the day to ask yourself those 5 questions, it sticks. It really sticks. And you can, depending on how you commute to work, you might do this on your way home from work and you don't even, I physically write it down, I journal it. And you don't even have to do that. As long as you take the mental time, I'm talking 10 minutes a day, to sit down and just think, what went well today? What didn't go well? What would I do differently next time? What did I learn about myself today? And what did I learn about others? Do that for 10 minutes a day and your learning skyrockets.
Wow. I want to go to the book that you write and that you just released this year, right? The book "You Are a Leader Now What," right? And what is that book about? Can you share with us?
Yeah, so it's about that first-time leader. It's about the first-time leader and the transitions that they need to make when they go from being an individual contributor to being a leader the first time. And all kinds of things covered in there. What are the typical mistakes that leaders make? About emotional intelligence and the fact that if you work on your emotional intelligence, it's one of the biggest investments that you can make in yourself as a leader. To think about communication skills, particularly around listening. So there's a lot of content in the book about both active listening and deep listening to be able to improve your leadership skills. So chapter by chapter, there's different things. It's either learning from mistakes of the past, or it's about learning a new technique or a new shift that you need to make. At the end of every chapter, funnily enough, practicing here exactly what I'm talking about with self-reflection, at the end of every chapter, there's a moment of reflection. So you read one chapter, the idea is it's supposed to be a very practical book. You read one chapter, and then at the end of every chapter, sometimes there's only 3 questions, sometimes it can be as many as 12 questions that I ask you at the end of every chapter for you to give yourself an honest scorecard about your approaches around whatever that topic was in that chapter. So on the emotional intelligence chapter, there's questions at the end about your emotional self-awareness, about your emotional self-management, self-motivation, about empathy, about relationships, and you answer those questions. I encourage people, it's funny because I personally don't write in books very often, but I encourage people, if you've got a copy of my book and you get to that moment of self-reflection at the end, get a pen out, get a pencil out and scribble your answers because it'll really help you to embed the concept.
Beautiful. Mick, the next question I know is not going to be fair for you, but I'm going to ask you. If you pick one chapter in the book that you like most, and then share about that, what would that chapter be?
Oh wow, that's like trying to pick my favorite child. Come on, that's very unfair. I'm gonna pick 2. If that's okay.
Absolutely, yes.
I think if any leader out there that's struggling with the transition to leadership, if I could point you in 2 directions in the book, one would be the common mistakes that most leaders make. And you might be surprised at some of them. And these are These are pitfalls that nearly all new leaders fall into. So there's 8 in there. There's 8 common mistakes that most leaders make. So that one, I think if you read that chapter and nothing else, you'll have a different perspective of what it means to be a leader. And the second one's going to be around communication skills and what I call deep listening, which does stand on the shoulders of the work of Otto Scharmer. And it's encouraging people to move away from listening to what they already know or listening to what confirms what they already believe, and getting them to listen with an open mind, with an open heart, and an open will. And if you can be a better listener as a leader, your leadership skills are going to triple. But maybe even that's understating it. 10 times. You'll be a 10 times better leader if you can learn how to deeply listen to your people.
Thank you for sharing that. So that's two chapters that you learn most from the many chapters in the book, right? The one is that the 8 common mistakes that leaders normally make, and the second one is about communication and deep listening. Since you're writing about that, we're gonna go to the next question, because listening is something that no school is teaching. Even when we grow up, right? No parents was teaching us. Not a lot of parents know how to teach kids to listen well, right? Because even themselves, they don't know how to listen well. So how can they teach people? So how can our listeners improve their ability to listen?
Oh, wow. That's a powerful question. I'm going to start with this one. Listening is not the same as waiting for your turn to talk. Listening is not the same as waiting for your turn to talk. And too many people get into meetings or other situations, and instead of actually focusing on what the person is talking about, they're busy formulating their response or what they're going to say. And if you're thinking about what you're going to say, you're not really listening to what the person is saying. Okay, that's number one. Number two would be to develop, and this is a muscle that takes practice, develop the ability to filter and sort. And what you're filtering is substance. You're listening to the substance of what someone is saying, and you're filtering out what I call context. So if someone's telling you a story about, they went walking down the beach one day and, this thing happened and this is how it made them feel, you've got to filter out the things that were not important. The fact that they were walking on the beach, okay, who cares? But what was it that happened and how did they feel about it? So it's that ability to filter and sort what was of substance there. And I'm going to give you a little golden tip here for anyone. It's a funny thing that happens. When someone is trying to share something with you and it's important to them, it's usually the very first thing they say and the very last thing they say that are actually the most important. So the first thing, it's on top of their mind. So you're hearing what's on top of their mind. And the reason why the last thing that they say is really important is because what they're doing is they're subtly building up courage to tell you what's really on their mind. And they're watching for your body language reaction. They're watching to see if you're judging them. So the third lesson, right? What we're doing is we're making sure we're not waiting for our turn to talk. The second one is we're filtering and sorting. The third one is to listen without judgment. Listen without judgment. And then they're really going to tell you what's on their mind. Do not interrupt them. If there's a big pause, let there be a big pause. Because remember, the person is processing right there in front of you. So the third trick is to listen without judgment and give them space.
Wow, beautiful. So give time and then listen to them instead of jumping in and for the next questions, right? And then filter and sources and I really thank you for the advice. Listen to the first the first thing that they say or the last thing that they say is very important. And the last one is listen but not without judgment, and that piece is extremely, extremely hard.
Yeah.
Because
Go,
yeah,
go.
because we normally come into with the very, very good intention. We already form in ourselves, like how my friends were feeling, how my wife is feeling about that situation. So in our heads already have some biases already right there. So when I listen
Yeah.
to the conversations, I tend to inject the bias to coming into the conversation, right? So what can I do to shut my mouth and let the conversations flow without letting the bias to coming in and make it go into the different directions?
Yeah, brilliant. All right, so I'm going to give you 2 tips here. Well, great question, by the way. The first one is stay curious,
Stay
and
curious.
stay curious as long as possible.
Mm.
And the second one is to use something called clean language.
Mm.
And the best way that I can describe clean language is the ability to not just listen, but then when you're asking questions back, staying curious, you ask questions that don't have any bias or judgment in the question.
Mm.
So, for example, if someone says to you, they're talking about, they would really like to be able to master the way that they do presentations. Instead of jumping to conclusions about what that means, stay curious and say, when you say master, what do you mean by master?
Mm.
So you ask expansive questions that don't prejudge what you think they're talking about. And the longer you can stay curious and the longer you can use expansive questions, the more you get to the essence of what's really on that person's mind.
Mm.
This applies to emotional intelligence as well. So if you're in a conversation with someone and to you they seem to get angry,
Mm.
instead of saying, you seem angry right now, why are you angry?
Mm.
Which is a very judgmental question.
Mm.
You can shift that and go, something seemed to shift in you just now. What was that?
Mm.
See how that's curious?
Yep.
And it's curious without judgment. Yeah.
Mm.
So clean language.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks a lot for that. So stay curious a little longer and using the clean language, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Mick, I'm impressed of what you chose to do in your life, and now you're helping leaders around the world to challenge their status quo and do something that matters for the people, so that make jobs be meaningful for their employees, right? And make themselves be a better leader. And throughout your life, you really demonstrated the character of challenging the status quo. So I want to know the secrets that push you from the from the inside to always look out for things that you can challenge and make change. How did
Yeah.
you do that?
Yeah, really, really good question. The first thing, and this is one of Einstein's most famous quotes, and I think maybe it gets overused sometimes, but I think about it a lot.
Mm.
And Einstein has always said to us that to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result is the definition of insanity.
Mm.
So what inspires me to challenge the status quo is that only 1 in 5 people in the world truly love their job.
Mm.
So if we don't change our approach to leadership, that's going to continue.
Yeah.
So I'm inspired to challenge the status quo that way. How I do it then is to stay curious and ask questions.
Mm.
If something is the way people have always done it, why do we do it that way?
Ah.
Half the time we've forgotten. So you're in a company and the company does something in a certain way and it becomes part of the culture, becomes part of the fabric of that company. And yet you ask someone, why do we do it that way? And they go, oh, I have no idea. We've just always done it that way. And is it working? No, not really. Right? So ask the question, why do we do it that way? Stay curious. And then say, is it working? How is it serving us?
Beautiful.
And the answer is usually, actually, you know what? I can't remember why we do it this way. And no, I don't think it is serving us. But don't throw the whole thing away. Then you can get even more curious and go, okay, what is it about the way that we do it that does work? Oh, okay, that's good. What is it about it that doesn't work? Interesting. And how might we do that differently? And then before you know it, you've not thrown the whole thing away, but you've
Shifted.
refocused. Yeah.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot for doing that. Because and sometimes, Mick, I have this question because if you keep looking for ways to improve, and you will see so many things that need to be improved, need to look at differently. So and the speed of change is not as fast as sometimes we ambitiously want it to be, right?
Yeah.
So how can you give yourself the patience to see the change and not be disappointed about that, though?
Yeah, good question. And I'm going to scare you first, and then I'm going to give you something practical.
Sure.
The scaring part is this, is the world has never changed as fast as it does today. And yet it will never change as slow as it does today ever again.
True.
Okay, so that's really scary to think about. So we do need to be adaptive in the way that we go about our work. We need to pay attention and we need to be adaptive. But the practical part is that don't try to change too many things at once. I would say that the best advice I could give anyone is to try change one thing at a time. But at maximum, don't have more than 5. If you're trying to do more than 5 things at once, you're going to do those things very poorly. So you're better off doing either 1, let's get a little bit crazy and say 3 or 5. Try to do 1, 3 or 5 things at once and do them extremely well with focus, with intention. Don't try to do 16 things at once.
So similar.
If you're trying to do 16 things at once, you're going to do them very badly.
So similar to what you mentioned earlier, we went through the training for 5 days and go back with so many things to do, and then we ended up doing nothing, right? So just pick one, change, and have intention to change it really, really well, and that's how we're gonna become a better person, and then move to the next thing that we want to change, move to the next thing that we want to change also.
Exactly, and that doesn't mean that you will never address those other things. But if you try to do them all at once, you'll fail.
Sure. Mick, since we have I have 3 last questions for this conversation, all right? And we know that leaders are in crisis. We know that there's a lot of bad leaders out there, but I also have hope in leaders that we all come into this world, we want to do something well. We're put onto the leadership role because we are competent of doing leading, and the matter is that we're not yet knowing how to do it effectively, all right?
Yeah.
So if I want to become a better leader, leading the next generations, leading further into the future, what are the baby steps that I should be paying attention and learning and changing now to make it happen?
Yeah, very good. So first of all, I'm going to agree with you that no one actually shows up to work every day going, I'm going to be a bad boss. They don't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
It's just they've never been shown the way. So to give them a bit of slack, they don't think that they're a bad boss and they don't do it on purpose. That's the first thing. The second one would be an important question or statement to tell yourself repetitively. What got you here will not get you there.
Yeah.
What got you here will not get you there. So you were put into a leadership job because you're really good at your job. Right? So you might have been a wonderful software engineer. You might have been a great nurse, a great accountant. So you're good at your craft, but being good at your craft doesn't instantly make you a great leader. So you need to realize that every time you go up through your leadership career, every time there's a turn or a pivot that you need to make. And what worked for you in your last job is not what is expected of you in your next job. So you need to take the time to make that shift. And if you reach back, this is a big reminder, if you reach back and you find yourself still doing huge parts of your performer job, that means two things. One, you're not doing your new job properly. And two, you are robbing the opportunity of your successor to do that job properly. You're taking away their opportunity to learn and grow. So every time you make a step up in your career, you need to make the turn and go, okay, what has worked for me up until now will not be what is expected of me now.
Beautiful.
And the third practical part of that is to get out there and seek advice. Take a coach. Take a mentor. Coaching is probably better than mentoring, but take a coach or take a mentor that can help you to make that pivot away from doing to leading. And you will find that every time you make the step, you'll make a better transition.
Wow, thanks a lot for sharing that three insights for our leaders to look forward and change. Right. So the second question is Mick, is about thinking. You mentioned the word thinking numerous times during this conversation. All right, and my wife and I, we have been in the quest to help people to improve their ability to think. And every chance that we talk to experts like you are, your job involve, your works involve a lot of thinking, and deep thinking to make to make change, right? To help people to change. So, how have you been helping you to improve your own ability to think over these years, Mick?
Yeah, I'm going to say it is reflection and curiosity.
Ah,
So it's that ability at the start and end of any activity to really stop and think about, what's most important here?
ah,
What's most important here? What are we trying to achieve? And is the way that we're doing it really the best way to achieve our outcome? So it's to ask curious questions all the time. Is this working? Is there a better way?
ah.
So all the time, and the reflecting is reflecting on what did we learn from that? And that's always helped me to shift my thinking and huge realization moments. And I'm going to talk about kind of all kinds of things into psychology of, okay, that was a really interesting thing that just happened in the team right now. Why do we think that happened? What led us to that situation where two team members ended up bickering with each other? What was it? Right? So all the time, staying curious and asking myself questions. That's how I think.
Wow. I know that I asked you for the last three questions, but I'm going to ask for one more. Is that okay with you?
Of course.
Okay. And that is about curiosity. So your whole life, you practice curiosity really, really, really deeply, implementing it and using it. And I really enjoy the curiosity because that is something that can help we move everywhere and do things that beyond our imagination. However, not a lot of people has that capability. And so what was the secret that Mick is doing so that you can help yourself to stay curious that long?
Wow, that's a hard question because it comes as second nature to me. I'm a naturally curious person. I've got an insatiable curiosity. That's why I read so many great authors in the field of psychology, etc. So I've got a natural tendency to want to understand how something works, including the human mind, which is the most complex thing on this planet. So when something happens, I always want to know and work out why it happened and what led us to that situation. So how I stay curious? It's a hard question. It comes naturally to me. So I'm going to just encourage people. The more curious you are, the more you'll get to the root of what's really happening around you. I'm going to give an example. My long-term, as we discussed earlier, my long-term background is engineering. So an engineer generally tries to make rational decisions about what's happening. They try to make rational sense of the world. But then when I start studying psychology and I realize that most people make decisions emotionally and then they justify them rationally, that piques my curiosity to then understand an irrational world. So I try to rationalize an irrational world. And the only way you can do that is to stay curious.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's a book from Dan Ariel about that. It's also a beautiful book to read. Hey,
Yeah.
thanks a lot for doing that. I know that some people have the inclinations to be curious, and that is inside of them, right? And
Yeah.
and I hope that if we can help them to stay curious, to be curious, and build that one, they will see the world so differently, so beautiful, and keep asking and keep expanding and pushing the boundaries to the
Yeah.
next level. The last question for you is about the future. So we've been traveled back in time. We knew that you want to become a professional,
Yeah.
athlete, right? And then you get into the engineering world. You work, in the defense industry and then you get into the corporate world. Get ambitious about the urban mobility, and now changing the leadership space. All right, you wrote book to help people to improve, become better manager, better leaders, so that the ultimate goal is to create the environment where employees feel belonging, feel happy, and enjoy the works, right? So, is there anything Mick is doing and he's exciting he want to share with the audience so that we can celebrate with him in advance?
So I'm going to say that I'm working on book 2 and book 3 at the moment. And I think book 3 is really important. So I'll get to that in a second. So book 2 is called The Influential Mindset, How to Inspire People into Meaningful Action Around Your Worthy Cause. So, and where that comes from is I speak a lot about that being the secret to leadership. And then I get a lot of questions. Yeah, I get that, but how do I do it? How do I influence someone? And how do I influence them in a way that doesn't come across as manipulation?
Yeah.
So my second book is called The Influential Mindset. My third book is going to be about imposter syndrome. So one of the things I've discovered, the more and more I do coaching, the more and more I do podcasting, the more I do leadership programs for companies, the higher I realize the prevalence of imposter syndrome is. And I'm going to be doing some deep research on what is imposter syndrome, what causes it, and a really important question, is it getting worse? Because I really feel like, and I don't want to presuppose the answer because that will infect the research, but my gut is telling me that we've seen an increase in imposter syndrome since the advent of things like social media.
Wow. And I wish you have a beautiful journey researching and writing those 2 books. They're very important because being influential is one of the way that we can help the leaders to make the message across, right? But influential in an ethical way, not manipulative way, right? And then also the imposter syndrome is very important for us to relook at what we talk to ourselves, and then we can, if we want to change, we have to have a way to overcoming those little voices inside of our head that we can make actions. Beautiful one. Yes.
I'll just share one thing on that, Heart, and that
Absolutely, please.
is fear and limiting beliefs kill more dreams than failure ever did.
Yep.
Fear and limiting beliefs kill more dreams than failure ever did, and that's why we need to work on our imposter syndrome.
Beautiful. Mick, thanks a lot for being so generous to spending your afternoon on a Saturday and joining our show and sharing your stories, your amazing journey, and a lot of insights to our audience today. I really appreciate that. I look forward to see you in person one day. If you travel to this part of the world, you have new friend, new family. We're gonna be hugging you and take you out for for coffee, for beers, and enjoying the people, the food here in Vietnam. All right.
Wonderful. I love Vietnamese coffee, so you had me at coffee. I'll be there for sure. And thank you so much for the privilege and honour to be on your show today.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye bye.
All right. Very good. Thank you, huh?
Thank you.